to NatRevMD, a podcast where we share tips on optimizing medical billing and improving practice efficiency so you can have the business of your dreams. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Signorelli, founder of NatRevMD. Let's get started. Welcome to this week's episode of the NatRevMD podcast. This week, we're going to talk all about navigating membership fees. We often get asked, is there a way when you are billing insurance for you to also add membership fees to your healthcare practice? So we're going to talk all about that this week. So as you guys know, I'm your host, Dr. Heather Signorelli, and we own NatRevMD, which is a full service medical billing company. So all of our clients bill insurance, at least to some degree. Some kind of do a hybrid concierge model. Some do straight full insurance, and some are trying to figure out how do we increase revenue when it comes to their medical practice. Obviously, it's difficult with insurance rates. Obviously, you can negotiate all you want, but sometimes they just aren't cutting it. And so we are seeing an increasing trend for healthcare providers by charging an administrative or membership fee. And so we're going to talk all about that today. Obviously, when you think about why we're doing this, right, we're seeing rising inflation, we're seeing increase in operational expenses, we're seeing a decrease in reimbursement rates from many payers. And so it is difficult to stay financially stable while also delivering high quality patient care. And it is a balancing act. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about how you think about these different types of administrative fees. What are the different cash fee schedules that you can think through? We're going to talk about tiered membership models. We're going to talk about some of the compliance issues. Obviously, this podcast is just for educational purposes. Highly consider, reaching out to a healthcare attorney should you be considering doing this. We're going to talk a little bit about pros and cons of introducing these fees into your schedule or into your, practice. We're going to talk about ways to implement if you were deciding to implement a membership model. And then, of course, how to handle, some of those patient phone calls, et cetera. Really, really important that you understand that there are legal and regulatory risks around this. And so you really want to make sure, talk to a healthcare attorney, think through working through the regulatory compliance issues around this. We'll touch on a little bit of those as we go through the podcast. And hopefully this will help answer some of your questions with regards to really, should you be doing this? How do you think about this? And could this be a way for you to increase your revenue in 2025? So obviously, let's talk a little bit about why, we're seeing this trend, why we're seeing practices explore these types of fees. As you guys all know, right, we all know inflation is driving up costs of everything, whether that's supplies, rent, salary, wages, and benefits, utilities, all the things are increasing. But at the same time, reimbursement from payers is declining. So we've got to start thinking through what is the value proposition and that we provide to the patient, and how can we think through administrative burdens that we know are in our practice that we're having to deal with. We know that it takes twice as much time to do certain types of paperwork. And so how do we balance all of that and still have enough time to spend with our patients? And so we do see practices in a tough spot. And we do see this trend of administrative and kind of membership fees being a potential solution. But you do have to be very careful that in general, you're not charging cash for something when you are in network with a patient's insurance. That service is covered by the payer. And so that's kind of the high level view of this is, again, you cannot charge cash for a service that you are in network with a patient's insurance if that is a covered service, with that payer, especially Medicare. And there's some insurances where you just can't charge at all. Many state Medicaid have that rule. And so you'll want to, work through your state Medicaid if you do see Medicaid patients and make sure you're not breaking any of those rules. So again, that's why it's really, really important to talk to a healthcare attorney should you have questions about this. So first, we're going to talk about the different types of fees and kind of some of those tiered membership models that are out there. And so that's going to kind of give you a framework for how you could think about this should you be thinking about some sort of cash pay model in your practice. So there's 3 different types of fees that we'll cover today. So there's administrative fees for services, there's direct payment fees, and then there's concierge medicine type fee structure. And again, each of those are different and maybe not all applicable to insurance practices, but it's a way for you to kind of think through the framework around as you make a decision around how to implement this in your own practice. So there's administrative fees for services, and these are really a way for you to charge for administrative tasks that are not reimbursable for by insurance. So I'm going to give you some examples for these. This is high level, and you do want to make sure that these are not covered by the payers that you are in network with. So things like prescription refills, faxing documents to employers or schools, completing forms for disability or FMLA, answering non-medical questions that kind of come through the phone tree. So these are fees that are typically small. It's anything from $20 to $150 a year, or you come up with a per click, service per form that you have to fill out for a patient. So again, these are very small dollar amounts, but can cover small non-clinical tasks that patients need from you, but insurance aren't going to reimburse. So for example, charging $25 annually for unlimited prescription refills is an example that you could use, or, $10 per form for disability, or $10 per form to send into the employer, to a school. And so those are kind of simple things that you can do. And I do see practices doing that. I think even our own pediatrician's office does that. And again, this is their time, right? If I was a lawyer, I'd be charging, much more than that for my time. So, and certainly in a 15-minute increment. So important to think through your time. I think physicians in general, we've come to think, well, we don't want to do that. That's not nice. That's just not the way it's done. But I think honestly, with the way that insurance fees are going down, this is just one way for us to explain to patients, hey, payers continue to decrease rates. We want to value, the services that you need. And in order for us to cover those services, this is a minimal charge that we need to provide. And, maybe you're going to have some patients that get upset by that, but I would think the most would understand. All right. So another model, kind of like a direct payment fee model, which is where patients pay the provider directly for all services. So completely bypassing insurance entirely. So this is something very different where a patient is paying a monthly charge direct to primary care, right? You're just not dealing with insurance at all. You've got unlimited office visits. You've got virtual phone consultations. You've got preventative care, wellness services, all the things. And basically practices are not billing insurance at all. Obviously, the pros for this are that you do have flexibility in care. You've got phone or virtual visits. You don't need in-person visits. You are able to spend more time with patients. But the problem with this is you may not always have patients who want to or who can afford to get into this DPC type of model. And so this can get challenging depending on the market and the subspecialty that you're in. And so it may not always be something that's available to you and to your patients, but just want to kind of call that out as a specific model. Now, the next is kind of this idea of you bill insurance, but on top of that, you're offering a premium service. So this is where like a membership fee comes into. Sometimes they call it a concierge medicine fee. Again, you're still dealing with the insurance, right? So that helps most of your patients, but then you're offering a higher level of care. So maybe it's availability of same-day appointments, 24/7 access to a physician via phone or text, or comprehensive annual physicals that include advanced diagnostics that are non-covered. And you want to be careful here, right? Because if you're charging a membership fee and it's including something, it can't be something that's covered. And so you really want to be careful on how you word these things and how you explain them to patients. So again, you're still billing insurance, but you're charging a membership fee that's oftentimes is several hundred to even tens of thousands of dollars annually, depending on the level of service, depending on your subspecialty, depending on the advanced diagnostics that you're offering. Does that include genetic testing or non-covered other types of tests and evaluation of those tests that is outside of kind of typical covered care? And I would say that this is where we're seeing the trend starting to increase in our own practices, is this idea of a membership fee to get better access, better appointments, better ability to have, maybe even a navigator type person who's helping an individual through a complex health issue that maybe not quite covered care. So this is, again, kind of where we're starting to see practices go.
If you're enjoying listening to the NatRevMD podcast, please subscribe wherever you're listening to our podcast. Leave us a review because those are the things that help us get in front of more physicians. Thanks so much.
So we're going to talk a little bit about some examples of a tiered membership model that we're starting to see crop up. And again, this is really around fees that you're charging patients when they are also billing insurance through your practice. So again, you are in network with their insurance, you're still billing insurance, but on top of that, you are offering a membership model. I'm seeing folks offer kind of 2 or 3 tiers of membership models. Always suggest offering more than one. So folks, kind of feel like they're getting a value or they're getting to choose. So we'll talk about, 3 tiers that we're kind of seeing crop up. And again, really focus on not providing services under this membership model that are covered by insurance. Very important to do that for Medicare. Medicare has very specific rules around this, and obviously not for Medicaid patients in most states, I should say. So anyway, tier 1, you can think of this as like your basic tier, right? Maybe you get just priority scheduling. Maybe you get access to webinars or newsletters or educational content that the physicians are making. Maybe you have discounts on uncovered services or nutrition counseling or cosmetic procedures or products that you're offering in the office. And so this is kind of your basic, maybe $50 a month or a couple $100 a year type model. Now, tier 2 could be a step above that, right? Maybe it's comprehensive care. Maybe you get everything that's in the tier 1, but maybe you get same day or next day appointments. Maybe you have direct communication with a physician or provider via phone or an email or text. And so that's maybe $150 a month or, $1,800 a year. And again, these prices are just ideas. It's going to depend on your geographic area, what specialty you're in, and, kind of what your patients may be able to, afford and what's happening around you. And then the tier 3 you could think through is that next step up above that. So maybe that's $300 a month. Maybe that's 24/7 access to the physician. I'm not sure I would sign up for that, but maybe that's an option for some. Obviously, you can clear tier 1 and tier 2 benefits. Maybe it's home visits for wellness checks or urgent needs. Maybe it's advanced testing or genetic screening or additional time that you spend on a physical kind of going over some of those more wellness issues. And again, you want to be careful with this so that you're not, again, putting something in there that would then otherwise be covered with billing insurance. For example, extending time of visits, et cetera. So really want to make sure that, you're wording that and offering that appropriately. So just be very careful about that. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of some key compliance concerns. And so we'll talk through 4 of those. So obviously, compliance, we've got to make sure that everybody's being compliant. So number 1, like I mentioned, you really can only add fees that are for non-covered services only. And again, that's if you're in network. If you're out of network, this becomes a very different situation and you can be out of network. You just need to make sure that you're complying with the rules around alerting patients that this is a non-covered service, that you're not, in network, and that here's your estimate of fees. So again, this is for in-network physicians and offices. So obviously non-covered services only is part of that membership model. Be very careful with Medicare and Medicaid rules, right? We just talked about that. We do have some payer contracts that prohibit charging additional fees for services deemed part of standard of care. And so you do want to make sure that, again, this is all above and beyond standard of care. And obviously, if you are going to offer this to patients, obviously you can do that as an opt-in situation where patients can opt in if they're wanting that. Or you could even do an opt-out situation where you're notifying patients, 3 to 4 months ahead of time saying, I'm implementing this across the board. All of my patients are going to have this. And then you have to get those signed agreements and make sure that they really know what the fees cover and an opportunity to find a new group should they desire to do so. I know that that's the riskier situation to do an opt-out, right? Because patients may not feel good about that and they may go find another physician. So again, very dependent on your wait times, what's your wait list look like, what specialty are you, and what's the level of extended services that you could offer. So we're going to talk a little bit about pros and cons of charging these fees. Obviously, pros, we've got to offset rising costs. This is an option to do that. It does provide some level of compensation for those non-billable tasks. In some ways, you could think of this as improving patient satisfaction. You're going to be offering enhanced services that maybe you wouldn't be able to do if you were running a traditional insurance-only model. Obviously, cons of this is that you've got to be very careful about compliance with payer rules and federal regulations. You really want to make sure that you're in a market that's going to kind of sit well with this, right? Because if you're in a market where you may be the first to start this, you may have some reputation that patients don't want to pay for this. So you may lose some patient volume. So really, really want to make sure that, paying attention to any sort of attrition concerns if those patients are unwilling to pay. And so really, how you represent this, how you present this to patients is really, really important. I think there's still this whole idea that doctors are out there making, tons of money. And I think that that's not necessarily the case anymore. Obviously, doctors make, typically a good salary, but it's nothing compared to what it was, 10 to 20 years ago. And medical school, all the things. So I could go down a rabbit hole. So say you're like, okay, I'm still going to bill insurance. I've thought about my tiered models. I have some stuff I can offer to patients. Now, how do you implement this? So obviously, the first and foremost is really going to be about you describing the value proposition. What do patients truly value that insurance companies do not cover? And how can you offer that as part of your business model? And you'll want to think through both the value proposition and how to explain that to patients, but also how you're going to operationalize this. How are you going to guarantee same day appointments? Are you going to stay late if something comes up and you're running over? Are you going to, save certain appointments, the slots for that day? And then what happens if they go unfilled? All of these things are going to be things you're going to want to consider. Obviously, you're going to want to communicate transparently with your patients, talking about why the fee is necessary, what patients are going to receive in return, if this is optional or not, et cetera. And like I've said before, please engage with some sort of legal counsel just to make sure that they review your fee structure and your payer contracts and make sure that they help craft this for you in the right manner. Obviously, you're going to have patients who aren't a fan of this. They're going to not, want to pay. They're going to think that the insurance should cover everything. Maybe they don't value, the services that you're going to offer, or maybe they want the services for free. Probably all of those things could happen. So obviously, you're going to want to think through, are you going to offer any opt-out options, or is this going to be, optional for patients, or is it going to be mandatory? If it is mandatory, you're going to want to really make sure that you've got written notices for discharging patients, because there are very specific rules around discharging a patient and making sure that you have compliance around the timelines at which you allow patients to discharge. So really, really, really important to think through those things. So again, I appreciate you guys kind of joining this week. I'm talking about membership fees. So there's the kind of different structures. We really focused on administrative and then those concierge membership fee structure to really think through, is this something that you could bring to your practice when you do have rising costs? Just be careful that they do need to be implemented thoughtfully, need to have some thoughts around compliance, and really want to make sure that, everybody's paying attention to how this may impact their reputation and also your office's operational workflow. And so really, really critical to think through all of these important things. So I hope you guys found this useful. And as always, if you are looking for a new billing partner, head over to NatRevMD, that's NATREVMD.com. And if you did like this podcast, please share it with a friend. Head on over to where you're listening to this podcast and leave us a 5-star review. It helps us reach more physicians. And that's what we're here to do, is educate. So have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next week.